Montana Territory, April 1881. The wind carried dust through the alley behind the copper-horned saloon, sweeping past broken crates and a rusted washtub. And that was where Beau Ellery saw her hunched near a pile of worn blankets, her arms wrapped tight around two small children. The boy looked no older than 6. The girl, maybe 4, clung to her mother like a barnacle. Beau stepped back before they could see him. He had come around the back to check on his horse tied up near the kitchen entrance. He had not expected to find a woman and her children living among the trash and rot. He waited a beat, then stepped forward slow. "Ma'am," her head jerked up. She shielded the children instinctively, eyes wide, jaw tight. Her face was drawn, dirt smudged along her cheekbone, but her gaze was sharp. Protective, tired in a way he had seen in war and in drought. "I ain't causing trouble," she said, voice thin but firm. "Go on, I ain't the law," Beau said, hands raised. "Just saw you, thought you might need something." The boy peeked out from behind her. His eyes were the same green as hers. The girl's hair was tangled gold, her little hand locked in her mother's worn shawl. Beau crouched down a few feet away. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then said, "Etta Fairburn. This here's Warren and Willow." Beau nodded. "Beau Ellery." She did not offer more, just pulled her shawl tighter around the kids. Her dress was threadbare, the edges frayed. A cracked tin plate sat near her foot with a few crumbs. "You live back here?" he asked, already knowing. "I work inside when they let me. Cleaning, laundry." "Sometimes they pay, sometimes they don't." Her voice went flat. "We sleep back here." Beau looked past her to the broken boards leaning against the saloon wall, forming a makeshift shelter. "This ain't life," he said quietly. "Come with me." Etta's brow furrowed. "You don't even know me." "I saw enough." She shook her head, pulling the kids closer. "I don't need fixing, I just need to get through the week. They might let me serve drinks again if I keep quiet." "You got 2 kids sleeping in a dirt alley," he said, voice steady. "I ain't saying you need fixing, I'm saying you deserve better." Warren looked up at him. "You got food?" Beau's chest tightened. "Yeah, son, I got food." "Don't," Etta warned, standing. "Don't promise things to them." "I ain't promising, ma'am." Beau stood too. "I'm offering." She looked at him for a long moment, her lips pressed together, her body still tense. Then Willow started to cough deep, rough, the kind that settled in the chest and stayed. Beau stepped back, giving her space. "I got a cabin outside town, clean beds, wood stove." "Ain't much, but it's better than this. You live alone?" "Yes." She looked down at her children. Warren was watching her, eyes too old for his age. Willow leaned into her side, coughing again. Etta didn't speak, just scooped up the little girl and took Warren's hand. When she looked back at Beau, her chin was lifted, shoulders squared. "All right," she said, "but just for tonight." Beau nodded, quietly grateful. They rode out an hour later. Warren sat in front of Beau on the saddle, eyes wide with wonder. Etta rode behind him, holding Willow, who had fallen asleep against her chest. Her hands were cold when they brushed his coat, and she kept her distance, but she was there. That was enough. His cabin sat at the edge of the pines, halfway between town and the grazing range. He had put it up 4 years back, solid walls, stone hearth, a loft for storage. He had built it for a life he never quite started. He had not expected it to feel full until that moment. Inside, he lit the lamp and stoked the fire. Etta stepped in slow, her eyes scanning the room like a deer waiting to bolt. She set Willow down on the cot and wrapped a blanket around her. Warren hovered by the hearth, staring at the flames. "I'll make stew," Beau said, lifting the lid off the pot and pouring in water. "You don't have to fuss." "It ain't fussing." She peeled off her shawl. Her hands trembled, but she busied herself checking Willow's fever. Beau handed Warren a spoon and a piece of dried apple. The boy grinned like it was Christmas. Etta sat at the table, watching him. "You got family?" she asked, voice low. "Used to. Folks died in the war, my brother too. Been alone since." She nodded once. "My husband left 2 winters ago. Said he was going to find work in Idaho. Never came back." Beau didn't speak. He just ladled stew into bowls and set them on the table. Later, when the kids were asleep, she stepped outside. He followed. The sky was clear, stars bright overhead. She pulled her shawl tight. "I do not know what you want from this," she said, "but I do not owe you anything." "I do not want anything," Beau said. "Just maybe you stay, rest." Get your strength back. She looked at him then, long and hard. I can work, she said finally. Clean cook, I am not a charity case. You are a mother, he said. You are tired. That is not weakness. That is just life beating on you too long. Her eyes softened just a little. He did not reach for her, just stood beside her, quiet. Inside, the fire crackled. Willow gave a small cough in her sleep, but it was softer now. Warren had curled up with a wool blanket and a full belly. Etta looked out across the trees, then up at the stars. She said nothing, but she did not go back to town. The first frost of April clung to the edge of the porch by dawn. Etta stood at the open door of the cabin, watching the tree line where the pines shifted with the wind. Her dress hung loose at the collar, the fabric faded from sun and wear. She hadn't slept much, too many years of keeping one ear open, but the silence here held a different weight. Not empty, just still. Behind her, Willow stirred in her blanket bundle, mouth slack in sleep. Warren had risen quietly an hour earlier and now sat beside the hearth, arranging pieces of kindling in careful rows. His fingers moved with purpose, like he was building something that might hold. Beau came in from the lean-to, boots heavy with mud. He carried a bucket of clean water and a wrapped bundle of eggs from the hens. His coat was damp at the edges from the dew. Stove's warm, he said, setting the bucket down near the basin. You want coffee, there's beans ground in the tin. I can make it. I'll do it, Etta said, moving toward the stove. She added water to the kettle, the motions sure despite the chill in her hands. Beau crouched beside Warren, handing him a stub of wood for the stack he was building. You like working with your hands? Beau asked. Warren nodded without looking up. I can fix things. Mama showed me how to patch boots. Beau gave a low hum. That's so. Maybe you help me mend the fence line later. Some rails need replacing. Warren's head lifted. I can do that. Etta glanced over, her mouth parting slightly. I'll come too, she said. You don't need to be watching him the whole time. You're welcome to, Beau said, but I trust him. She didn't answer, just went back to the kettle. By noon, they'd walked the southern edge of the field, where the snowmelt had softened the earth and tilted a few posts. Beau handed Warren a hammer and showed him where to place the nails. Etta worked beside them, her sleeves rolled high on her arms. She moved with quiet efficiency, not speaking unless spoken to, her gaze always flicking between her son and the line of trees beyond. What's out there? Beau asked once, following her look. Nothing, she said. Just used to keeping watch, he nodded. They didn't speak again for some time. Later, Etta rinsed her hands in the creek behind the barn. The water was sharp with melt. She stayed crouched, elbows on her knees, watching the current drag tiny leaves downstream. Beau approached, holding a cloth sack. You left this inside. She stood, taking it with a slow nod. The sack held her comb, a folded handkerchief, and the small wooden doll Willow had carried in her pocket. She hadn't realized it was missing. You didn't have to bring it. You didn't have to stay, he said. She looked at him then, mouth twitching like she might say something more, but she didn't. Instead, she turned back toward the cabin. Beau fell into step beside her. You've done this before, he said. What? Hard work. Long days. Keeping everything together. I was born on a farm near Independence. 4 girls, 3 brothers. There was always work. What brought you west? My husband wanted to try for land near Bannack, thought there'd be silver. But he didn't have the stomach for disappointment. Beau didn't press her for more. They reached the porch where Willow sat shelling peas into a tin bowl, her small fingers stained green. That night, Etta cooked cornmeal cakes and beans. Warren helped slice salt pork. The cabin smelled of smoke and pepper and something softer beneath it, something close to comfort. After supper, Beau stepped outside to check the horses. When he came back in, Etta was folding the blankets near the hearth. Her sleeves were still rolled, arms strong beneath the fabric. You let us stay another night, she asked, not looking at him. As long as you need, she turned then, her eyes steady on his. I don't want to owe you. You don't, she hesitated. I can sew buttonholes, hems. If you've got shirts needing mending. There's a pile in the chest, she nodded. He stepped past her and added a log to the fire. The light flared, casting their shadows high on the wall. Willow yawned and leaned against her mother's leg. Warren sat cross-legged with a piece of twine, tying knots the way Beau had shown him earlier. Etta didn't speak again that night, but when the fire burned low, she laid her children on the cot without asking if it was hers to use. She moved through the space like she belonged to it now cautiously, but without apology. Beau sat by the coals, watching the orange glow fade to embers. The room held the scent of wood smoke and worn linen, and something in his chest settled for the first time in years. Outside, the wind shifted through the pines, and the night held. The snow melted quicker that year. By the second week of April, the muddy ruts along the cabin path had dried into cracked earth, and the creek behind the barn ran clearer than it had in months. Willow-chased sun warmed beetles near the blackberry vines while Warren helped Beau dig post holes for a small chicken run. Etta stood at the washboard, sleeves damp to the elbows, her fingers red from lye soap and cold water. Beau stepped up from the field, shovel balanced over one shoulder. "You got any use for a garden?" Etta wrung out a shirt and hung it on the line. "I know how to set one. Beans, squash, cabbage if the soil holds," he nodded. "South side gets good sun. We could start tomorrow." She didn't smile, but her voice held something close to ease. "I'll dig if you've got seed. I'll ride into town for some this week." She reached for another shirt, her movements quick and practiced. "Just don't let them cheat you. They'll charge double if you don't know the weight." He glanced over at her. "You know how to read weight. My father kept ledgers, taught me when I was little." Beau leaned against the porch rail, watching Warren tamp down a post with both hands. "You ever think about teaching?" Etta looked up, surprised. "Me, there's no school for miles. Most kids out here grow up without books. You could change that." "I don't even have a book to start with. I've got a Bible and a copy of Pilgrim's Progress in the chest. Could maybe get more if I ask around." Etta hesitated, then shook her head. "I wouldn't know where to begin." Beau didn't push. He just watched as Warren waved from the field, proud of his straight fence line. That night, Etta stayed outside after the children had gone to sleep. The moon hung low, casting pale light on the edge of the porch. Beau was oiling his saddle, seated on a stool near the barn. "You've been kind," she said quietly. He didn't glance up. "Not kindness, just right." She crossed her arms. "You don't even know what I've done. I know what you're doing now." She stepped down from the porch, her bare feet pressing into the cool grass. "You think I'm someone else. I think you're a mother who kept going when you could have quit." She looked past him toward the dark stretch of trees. "I used to believe in things. Before," he set the rag down. "What made you stop? When you lose too many things you can't get back, belief feels like a trick." Beau stood, slow, careful not to crowd her. "Then don't believe, just rest a while." Etta pressed her lips together. "It's hard to let go of watching for the next bad thing." "I know." She met his eyes, and for once she didn't look away. "Sometimes," she said, "I wake up thinking we're still behind that saloon, that the roof's leaking and the babies are cold." Beau's voice was low. "And then I hear the creek, and I smell wood smoke, and I remember we're here." He stepped closer. "That's how it starts." What starts?" "Living again." She took a breath, deep and slow. "I don't know if I'm good at that." "You don't have to be good. Just willing." Her jaw worked slightly, like she was holding something back. Then she said, "I haven't felt safe in a long time. You are now." The silence stretched between them, soft and full. Etta finally nodded just once. "I believe you." And Beau, for the first time in years, felt something settle in his chest like roots finding ground. The morning sun filtered through the window panes in long golden streaks, catching the dust that hung in the air. Etta stood at the small table, fitting dried yarrow stems into neat bundles with twine. The herb had been growing wild along the southern slope, and she'd gathered it yesterday with Willow perched on her hip and Warren trailing behind with a burlap sack. Beau passed behind her, setting an empty pail near the door. "You know your plants." Etta tied the final knot and set the bundle aside. "My grandmother kept a stillroom. She taught me what was worth drying, for fevers, bleeding, sprains." "You still remember all that?" She nodded once. "I don't forget things that kept my children breathing." There was no bitterness in her tone, just clarity. Beau leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You think you could teach me?" Etta raised an eyebrow. "You planning to take up midwifery?" "I'd settle for knowing what not to chew on if I get snakebit." Her mouth tugged into the faintest curve. All right, but you'll need a proper satchel. And I'm not wasting good tincture on someone who won't write labels. I'll write 'em neat. Warren burst through the door just then, boots scraped with clay, a folded scrap of hide in his hands. There's something near the creek, he said, breathless. I think it's a den. Smells like fur and iron, Beau straightened. Show me. Etta touched Warren's shoulder. Stay close to Beau, I will. They crossed the field, Etta watching from the porch. Willow tugged at her hand, holding out a piece of bark painted with berry juice. Etta knelt to admire it, her fingers brushing her daughter's curls. The girl's cheeks had filled again, color blooming where pallor had lingered too long. Beau returned near midday, trousers damp and streaked with dirt. Badger, he said. Likely old. Not a threat unless cornered. Etta handed him a tin plate with bread and pickled beans. We'll mark the path. He sat on the step, stretching his legs. Warren wants to trap it. He's not old enough. I told him. He took it fair. Etta leaned against the post, arms folded. He's too quick to take on the hard things. He learned that somewhere. She didn't answer, just watched Willow gather smooth stones at the edge of the clearing. You ever thought about staying? Beau asked after a long pause. Etta looked down. I've been staying. I mean more than that. Putting roots, making it yours. I don't know if I could. You already are. She walked inside then, quiet. But that night after the children were asleep, she laid 2 quilts down instead of 1. Beau sat at the table mending a strap, his fingers moving slow. Do you need help with that? She asked. I've got it. She pulled a chair beside him anyway, taking up the needle. You're using the wrong thread. I thought thread was thread, she snorted softly. You'd lose a boot by sundown. He watched her a moment, then said, I've had worse losses. Her hands stilled, then moved again. What did you lose? Time, my brother, plans I didn't speak out loud. She didn't pry, and he didn't offer more. When the strap was done, she folded it neatly and set it aside. You think it's foolish, she said, to believe a place like this can hold. No, he said. I think it's the only thing worth believing. She looked at him, eyes clear in the lamplight. I don't want to be beholden. Then don't be, stay because you want to. Etta reached for the lamp wick and turned it low. The room dimmed to a soft hum of heat and breath. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. She sat beside him until the fire faded to coals. And when she finally rose, she paused at the cot, touched her children's hair, then crossed to the quilts and laid down beside him. Not close, not yet, but not apart. Outside, the wind moved through the grass like a hush. And inside, nothing broke. The sky opened with warm rain the next afternoon, soft and steady, drumming gently against the cabin roof. Inside, the air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. Etta stood near the hearth, brushing the folds of her skirt dry with one hand while Willow sat cross-legged on the rug, humming tunelessly as she lined up bits of bark in a wide circle. Beau came in from the lean-to with his coat dripping, his hat slung low in one hand. He closed the door behind him with a quiet grunt and set the hat on its peg. She's holding steady, he said. Creek's high, but she's not spilling over yet. Etta nodded, then glanced toward the window, where Warren sat perched on the bench with his knees pulled up, watching thin rivulets trace down the glass. I've never stayed in one place this long, she said, voice low. Not since Missouri. Beau pulled off his boots and left them by the door. It feel wrong to you, she shook her head, just unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's coat that happens to fit. He crossed the room and crouched beside Willow, gently nudging one of her bark pieces back into line. We could build her a box for these, keep them from blowing off the porch. Willow looked up and nodded solemnly. I was thinking, he said, rising, about that south pasture. If we cleared it, there'd be space for a second garden. Or fruit trees, maybe. Etta leaned against the table, arms crossed. That'd take years to bear. You planning to still be here? I am. She didn't speak for a moment. Then what if I said I wanted to plant plum trees? I'd start digging tomorrow. Willow let out a small laugh, and Etta's mouth curved toward something close to a smile, though it didn't quite land. She looked tired, but not in the way she had when she first arrived. This was different. A quieter kind of weariness, the kind that came from letting herself hope. That evening, the rain tapered off. Beau set out a dry log and added it to the hearth. The fire caught quick, casting a soft orange light across the room. Warren helped Etta fold the washing that had dried indoors. Stacking it neatly on the bench after supper, Beau brought out a small wooden box and opened it on the table. Inside lay a worn silver brooch, a few coins, and a folded paper wrapped in twine. "These were my mother's," he said, nudging the brooch forward. "I kept it because it reminded me of her hands. She had this way of pinning it just before church, right under her collar." Etta reached out and touched the edge with her fingertip. "It's beautiful. I'd like you to have it." She drew her hand back. "Beau, I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want you to know you belong here, not out of debt, not out of need, but because you choose to." Etta looked at him for a long time, eyes steady. Then she reached out again, lifted the brooch, and turned it in her palm. "I never had anything fine," she said. "It's not fine," he replied, "but it's yours." She closed her fingers over it, then stepped around the table and stood in front of him. "You've never asked me to stay. I figured I didn't need to." "You don't," she said. "I'm telling you I want to." Beau let out a breath like the release of something held too long. He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, hands rough but careful. "You're not waiting for the next bad thing anymore," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm not." He kissed her then slow and sure, and she leaned into it without hesitation. When they drew apart, her forehead rested against his, and for a long time neither said anything. Warren and Willow were already asleep by the fire, curled beneath a patchwork quilt. Etta and Beau moved quietly, banking the coals, drawing the curtains. That night she lay beside him not with distance, but with ease. Her head rested against his chest, and his hand stroked the curve of her back until her breath grew deep and even. By the end of that week, they added a new row to the garden, and Beau cleared the edge of the south pasture. Warren helped hammer together a seed box, and Willow named every plum sapling as they were planted. Etta stitched new curtains for the cabin windows and hung dried rosemary over the door. She began teaching Warren his letters each morning, using a piece of slate and a nub of chalk Beau had brought back from town. In the evenings, she read aloud from the old Bible, her voice low and steady, while the children listened with their eyes half-lidded near the fire. When spring broke in full, Beau built a wooden swing and hung it from the broadest oak near the edge of the clearing. Willow shrieked with delight the first time she flew forward, the hem of her dress catching the wind. Etta watched from the porch, her hand resting lightly on Beau's arm. "You built us a good place," she said. "We built it together." She looked at him, then leaned in and kissed him again, soft and sure, the brooch glinting faintly at her collar. They married in June under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Just them, the children, and a circuit rider who'd known Beau from a winter past. Etta wore a plain cotton dress and pinned her hair with a comb Beau had carved from pine. Warren stood beside Beau, solemn as a man grown, and Willow tucked wildflowers into the ribbon of her mother's sash. No one in town knew what to make of it exactly, but no one asked questions either. Folks came to see that the woman who once slept behind the saloon now ran a house with tidy rows of green things growing outside, and a man who looked at her like he'd found home after miles of wandering. And she looked at him the same way. The days grew warmer. The cabin filled not just with sound, but with light. Laughter returned in bits and pieces, stitched into the seams of ordinary moments. Willow's muddy feet tracking across the floor, Warren's careful whittling of a bird he refused to name until it was finished. Etta kept the brooch in a small linen pouch when she wasn't wearing it, tucked in the drawer beside her sewing things. She wore it most days. There were no more nights spent watching the door, no more waiting for the world to take what little they had. Here, there was only the sound of the wind through the trees, the smell of bread baking, the warmth of a hand held in the quiet between words, and love not loud, not sudden, but built slow and steady across days and seasons. The kind that stayed.